Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Park Authority meeting of August 28th, or just a little after 6:30. We'll go ahead and get started soon. I got to read a couple people in. But before I do that, I just want to make an announcement at the front end so everybody understands who's listening. Everyone in the room understands what we're doing here this evening. This is just a committee meeting. There will be no action taken today, just a discussion. This is the first time the board will see the proposal from staff of potential budget cuts. Those are coming at the request of the county executive, who asked every agency to provide him with about 10%, 10% reduction list. Unlike last year, there are no governors on that. Everything is on the table from our general fund side of things. When we come back again for our normally scheduled meeting of September 11th, we'll have a budget committee meeting starting at, Allison, what time is that? Do we have a time for that yet?
5:45.
5:45. The budget committee meeting will start at 5:45. The first part of that will be our first look at the FY26 request that we'll ultimately submit to the county. The second half of that committee meeting will be a public input session. Because it's the second year in a row of being asked to make cuts, and this is 10%, it's a fairly large proposal. Did want to give the community a kind of a designated time to comment, weigh in on the cuts we are putting forward. So that will happen kind of the back half of that committee meeting. And then on September 25th, we will review and endorse both the proposed cut list and the proposed request during that meeting. And those will then get submitted over to the county. And then we'll see what happens come February when the county executive releases his advertised budget. Does anyone have any questions on that before I go
I
in?
have a question.
Sure.
Just so what the 11th, whatever that Wednesday, we'll have a committee meeting with the public coming afterwards. Are we going to limit that time wise? Because we've had some of these go for like 2 and 3 hours.
Yeah, I think what were we allowed to do by the county attorney? Okay.
I just asked because if we're going to do that, plus then the board meeting stuff, because
Well, the board meeting will start at 7:30. So
I'm just saying that we had one that was on the photography. It was about fees, and photography fees got cooked into it, even though
Mhm.
that wasn't part of that thing. And we were there for probably 2.5, 3 hours just on that one fee. So I
okay.
just didn't know what we were gonna do to. Because if we're gonna open it to the public and then say,
Right.
oh, by the way, half of you can't talk because we're gonna start the.
Sure. We'll have to think about that before we kind of do a formal release. So that's a good thought, though. Anything else? All right. And we'll go ahead and read in our two members who are joining us virtually. Oh, all three of them are there. All right, great. Okay, Virginia law authorizes remote participation of board members provided that a policy exists to ensure that such remote participation is consistently administered. This board has approved policy 111. Any such remote attendance must be approved by the board as long as a physical quorum of the board is actually present. Voice of the remote participant is able to be heard by everyone in the room, and the remote participation comports with the policy. So our first step is to verify that the remote participant's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for the meeting room, and confirmation of their location. We have three members joining us remotely tonight. Dr. Houghton, are you connected to this meeting remotely?
Yes, Abner Adu Houghton. I am joining from my residence in the Franconia district.
Thank you. I move that Dr. Houghton's voice may be adequately heard in this location. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Dr. Carter, are you connected to this meeting remotely?
Yes, I am. I'm Cynthia Jacobs Carter, and I am connected at my home in Franconia District.
Great. All in favor? Oh, sorry.
I move that Dr. Carter's voice may be adequately heard in this location.
Second.
Oh, yeah, I'm reading that wrong. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. And then finally, Jonah, are you connected to this meeting remotely?
I am Jonah Toomey, calling from my residence in the Drainsville district.
Thank you. I move that Ms. Toomey's voice may be adequately heard in this location.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. All right, second step. is to verify the remote participants' physical absence comports with the policy. Pursuant to the Park Authority's Policy 111 for remote participation in public meetings, I move that Dr. Adu Houghton, Dr. Carter, and Dr. Jonah Jonah Toomey be permitted to participate remotely in this meeting because it comports with the policy we adopted, and a physical quorum is present here at the Park Authority Boardroom, 9th floor, Harity Building.
Second the motion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. All right. All the preliminaries are done. We can start the budget committee. Ken, floor is yours.
We will now call the budget committee to order. And I don't know what Mr. Baird.
Thank you very much. And actually, I'm going to then ping pong over to Jay, who's going to kick off the presentation.
I am going to kick off the presentation. Thank you very much. I'm going to kick off the presentation because of the seriousness of what we're talking about. And I don't want to put Mike in the situation where anybody thinks that he is making any cuts himself to other people's divisions. Next slide. What I really wanted to highlight the most here for the packet, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming in. I know August is not usually your time to be together. We really do appreciate you guys making room and coming in so we can discuss this. So this is information item for the FY26, and this is what I'm going to highlight. I call it non-recommended budget reduction package, just to make it clear that we're not recommending any of these reductions, but as you know, with the fiscal projections that are happening are not that great. And so we have been asked, and Mike will get into it, we've been asked to provide a 10% reduction cut exercise. We did a 7% cut exercise last year. I do want to emphasize the fact that at this point in time, we'll talk about it a little bit at the end. This is an exercise. This is not a, we're not proposing these budget cuts. You know, we don't know, the county executive doesn't know what the projections are going to be at this point in time. I mean, what the actuals are going to be at this point in time. That'll become clearer as the year, you know, goes on towards the end of the year. Then he will be creating his budget in January. So while none of these are desired, it's an exercise that we had to undertake. And that's, did I miss anything? Okay, just want to make that clear. Kick it back over to Mike.
Next slide. So this is just a reminder, you'll see this pop up as we go through the budget process. This is where we are. I've circled that, of course, it's August 2024. And tonight we are going over first the package of non-recommended budget reductions. And we will also discuss the base recommendations that we have for requests in the general fund as well. Give you a little preview of the revenue fund also towards the end here. Next slide, please. So our guidance, and we have talked about this a little bit, our guidance from the county executive and the board of supervisors is just like it is for all other general fund departments that we come up with a total of approximately 10% of our general fund budget. Our target is $3.56 million, as you can see here. That's a big number, as we've talked about in the past. If you go to the next slide, you can see, just as a reminder, what pulls together our operating budget. It's $59.7 million right now in the FY25 adopted budget. You can see that on the left side, and then the general fund is $36.1 million. So these reductions are focused on that pie piece, the general fund side of things. Jay, I believe you're taking the next one.
Yes. So what is our budget composition? As you know, we, as I often like to say, I beg for 40% of our budget and we hustle for 60%. So that 40% of the general fund is really all we're talking about. This is not a revenue fund exercise. So out of our budget, it's this 36 million that you see on the left. Of that, about 20%, a little bit more than 20% are non-personnel, and the rest of them are personnel cuts. We are very personnel heavy, especially in the general fund, as you'll see. From that non-personnel, so from that general fund adopted, you see the breakdown for divisions. Park Ops is there, administration, resource management, interpretation. I think that it's super stressful with some of those divisions that have a lot of general fund, like Park Ops. So you'll see when we talk about the 10%, why you'll see a lot of that, those cuts reflected in those divisions. Same thing with resource management, and interpretation. Administration has, a big, pie of general fund, but that's our HR and our director's office and the salaries. It's all, support focused, our procurement, those types of, endeavors. Yes,
What is Marcom?
I'll go. What is Marcom, Deidre? Oh, your division, what's your division?
Marketing.
Marketing.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I knew the answer. I just
I
wanted to-
forgot. I appreciate that.
So am I going continuing on? Okay, so areas that can't be reduced, and this is important. So of that sort of pie chart of non-personnel cuts, about $3.4 million can't be touched. And that's the money that we pay across the street to exist. And so it's our PC replacement, it's our postage, it's our our utilities, it's our fuel, motor pool vehicles, vehicle replacement. It's those internal county charges that have to stay. We have about 3.8 right now $1 million in WPFO that kind of comes out of that personnel portion. And so non-personnel is 4.1. So if you do the math, and that 10% that we'll talk about is about 3.7,
3.65.
3.65, 3.65. That only leaves about 500,000 if I just took all of our operating dollars that we had.
Can you
left.
explain what WPFO is?
Yes, WPFO is what happened. We'll get into it a little bit with the cuts. WPFO is what our staff charge back to other funds. So the majority of this is our bond, our CIP. So a lot of our Park Development Division charges a percentage of their salary to a project. And so we'll talk about that because that's in our reductions package to increase the WPFO. Not always bond, sometimes it's Fund 300. What else do we WPFO to?
Mostly that's
Some of
sometime sinking fund projects for that sort of thing.
Easement funds, things like that, but yeah, it's where we have to charge back salaries for specific. oversight.
Telecom.
Yes, that's work performed for
others.
others. Yes,
Right.
work performed for others.
Mm.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so the first one that we're gonna get right into it. The first reduction that we are proposing is reducing the summer entertainment series to a maximum of 8 shows per district. That'll save us about a little bit over $100,000. So we'd be reducing from 120 shows to 73 shows. This doesn't include the children's series. Really, the money that we have is the money that we expend. The lion's share of the money we expend is AV. And so the children's shows don't have that.
Right.
So it wouldn't save us that much. So with the reduction, each series will receive no more than $2,000 per show. Future contract increases with sound and AV. It's important to note right now that we are not, if we get about $150,000 from the county, we have the lion's share for cost of performers is dependent on foundation money. We got some carryover money in FY 25, but we're still gonna be about $60,000 over budget. We absorb about $60,000 for the concert series. It does not pay for itself. We have to absorb it already. So if the contract increases go up, and I'm talking about 2 different things. Let's say that this cut exercise isn't taken, but our contract dollars go up, we're still gonna have to reduce some because we're already absorbing about $60,000. If that goes up significantly, then that's gonna be an issue. So average spent per district, it was $24,000 in FY 24. The new rate would be a maximum of $16,000. So 5 districts would see significant reductions in offerings, the ones that have more than 1 concert per district. The biggest impacts are Mason, Mount Vernon, and Sully. Sully would need to change from movie series probably to a traditional concert. And did I miss anything? Arts in the Parks, okay. Did I miss anything?
Janet,
Yes.
did you say the children's series, you're not using AV?
It doesn't use
The sound
Yes.
contractor that we use for all of the other series, we do not use for the children's series.
Okay, so the AV that's used at Mosaic is provided someplace else. by someone else.
So we provide the AV for Mosaic, and we pay for that. For the children's series in Mosaic, so no, it's not provided by us.
So we wouldn't cut any of the children's
I just
series.
wouldn't
Yeah.
provide it back.
Oh,
I'm curious.
I don't know.
Okay.
We can ask,
Another question.
Yeah, I guess my question has to be the bulk of the funds that are used for the Mason concerts is monopole money. So it's not something that would be cut.
However,
So what you're suggesting is you're gonna be redirecting that.
Monopole money.
well, no, we'd have to, it's still, they would still have the one, go ahead. Sarah.
so right now for the Mason District series, the cost of the performers is covered by telecom. The cost of the AV, the staff support for the series is covered by the general fund. So, we would not be able to provide the AV
We wouldn't be
support
able to
unless.
provide support
yeah.
for that number, so we would have to
Correct.
cut back, which would mean less monopole money would be spent on the concerts.
Unless, yes, unless that's the one, because it still would have 8 concerts per, right? 8 concerts per year in each district. So this could all
Yeah,
go to
you're
Mason
looking at a
District.
29 concert schedule.
Right.
That's a
Right.
large decrease.
So it sounds like a big impact on Sully because, I mean, I think we only have like 4 movies a summer.
Mhm.
And we've always had movies. I mean, is there a possibility of having one movie? But you're just saying you're gonna cut out that AV contractor altogether. Is that what you're saying?
We're reducing
Okay,
the contract.
so,
So the movies are a little bit different.
Okay.
Extremely expensive
Yeah.
to run. And so we would need to look at what we do there. Do we go with a straight summer concert series? Do we offer one?
Right.
What's the best for the community there?
I'm talking to Kathy tomorrow, so.
I'm sorry, it just, it's just picking up of what Ron was saying. So if y'all say we have this budget for a district, Ron says, yeah, but I've got monopole money that I'm pushing towards it. Does that offer the ability to have more shows, or are you saying we're not gonna do more than X no matter what? And therefore, the monopole money is gonna get redirected. I'm just trying to understand.
My main goal is to add $109,703 to the cut list.
Right.
Anything after that, this is not an exercise to cut the summer concert series. If other, I think that there was a little bit of, the supervisors used to do the fundraising and now the foundation does the fundraising, which is great because we still have the money, but the reality is they're now fundraising for the concert series when, they could be fundraising for that same amount of money, could be going towards scholarships or, other stuff. And so if we can fundraise for the rest of it and we can increase the amount of concerts there, it's not, we want to limit, it's not a staffing.
No, but
Issue.
even based on what you just said.
Yeah.
At least and I can't remember the exact one, but my read of it was. We'd rather have them raised for something else rather than this.
No, I have to cut. So when we're cutting across let me just give you a peek into sort of the process for here. We have to try to cut evenly, or at least take a little bit from everybody who's got general fund. I can't leave people, okay, is Josh here?
No, he's not.
Okay, so Josh, he's on vacation, that's probably why. Josh in Park Services has 3 things that I had to choose from. Part of the summer concert series, MLK pool, or our ADA accessibility, which we have to do by law. So this is what we had to, so it's the 109. I would hope
My
that they
point
would
is that,
know.
but let's assume you get the 109 cut.
Yes,
That doesn't include Ron's monopole money.
no.
The monopole money will just sit, doesn't go.
Or no,
But if they want to spend it on Mason District and
Yeah.
it fits in with the amount for the AV, as Sarah was saying, or the monopole money could cover some of the AV or something like that, then
I don't
fine.
wanna prolong
Yeah.
this conversation, but this is a pretty gray area.
Mhm.
Because a little history lesson on it, is the Mount Vernon concert series used to be paid for by monopole money. And that monopole money got absorbed into our budget. And because of an anomaly in the agreement where it was given in Ron's district, his could not be, but there were others of us
Yeah.
that were funding our things, but don't have the option. It's just a monopole anomaly that creates that variance. So I think as we go through this exercise, we will have to consider fairness.
Yeah, we'll have to go through it, and with the new budget, that's $109,000 light, just figure out how the summer concert series.
But
would work
ultimately, I
across the
guess
board.
what I'm getting at is more, ultimately, whether the supervisors raise, let's say the supervisor raises a chunk of money for concerts in their district. That would be used to supplement what we're doing, not to say, oh, we're going to take dollars away from this program because the money's been raised so that we can go spend it somewhere
I don't think
else.
we're deciding any of this.
I don't think we're deciding any of
Making
those
recommendations, which
No.
I don't understand.
But what's happened before, what's happened in the past,
Out of the concert series period has not been decided exactly how it's.
But it
Except
will
that,
be tax dollars. It
Your
will be
tax
general
dollar.
fund tax dollars.
$1,000.
That's right.
So 109 tax dollars. I mean, we had to figure out how to get to that number.
Right.
So we did get to the 8 shows per district, and that's where we're starting off to have a parity, not looking into the monopole money. Or the reality is in the past, and the concert series are great, like, trust me, they're super popular, but because they're so popular, we get calls and requests all the time for supervisors adding, and we don't have any additional funds.
Right.
So we're already way in the red for the concert series, and so we were already planning before this exercise to we asked for carryover dollars, that we got $150,000 in carryover dollars, and we're still $70,000 short.
We're actually much higher than $70,000. So
Okay.
we absorb a lot of expenses.
Yes.
So all the staffing, the movie series is covered by the general fund. So there is a significant, and the staff is covered by the revenue fund. So when you look at, and I think we brought this to you a couple of years ago, when you look at the total cost of the concert series, it's significant. And so I think if this is taken, we would come back to you, show you the financials for the full series, and have a discussion on what we do moving forward and what's fair and what's equitable across the county.
And hopefully, and I guess the point I was trying to make that I think I made a little badly, is hopefully in the future, when the county's not in, we're not doing this exercise and we're actually putting forth positive stuff, it would be good to reconcile and say, concerts, especially post-COVID, is extremely important, that we just need to fund it so that we're not pulling from everything else, and figure out how we fund it so the stress isn't, on there, and we're not, and that's what I meant with the foundation, that we're not, the foundation's primary goal isn't just the concert series. We can get them to be doing other, stuff to scholarships and other things. And this concert series, because it's not that much. I mean, when we talk about the joy and the experience and the social capital that it comes with everybody getting together, 400,000 is not a ton of money in general to be able to fully fund this program. Okay. Starting off really great. We're gonna speed right through.
Oh,
Next
We
slide.
got all
We're
night.
speed right there, all night.
Somebody can order dinner now.
I'm done. Yeah. There.
That wasn't.
So Sarah Baldwin, Deputy Director for the Park Authority. I'm going to go through a couple of slides that are all related to park operations, and you'll notice on these slides, a lot of what we are proposing is cutting what we received in FY25. So the first item, we've had a lot of conversation over the past couple of years about forestry. Our forestry budget was significantly increased over the last couple of years, and we're at a point now still that we're only addressing high-risk trees. And so what we're recommending here is a $200,000 cut. Again, it would limit our ability to continue to address those high-risk trees. We feel like we will be okay with the budget unless we have big storm events. Where, that's very unpredictable. There have been years that we've spent, close to $1.2 million, if not more. And we are still at the point of, we are only addressing high-risk trees. We are not doing any preventative work on trees.
Sarah, before you move on.
Yep.
When you say current budget's 1.2, that includes the 890 that was added.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So the
All
200,
across it will up from here on.
the 200 is coming off of the 1.2.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. The next item.
I'm sorry, Sarah, can you go back? If in fact that does happen, I just wanted to put a finer point on the fact that we would be going for third quarter and carryover, because we can't hold, we went through the whole maintenance conversation. We really just can't hold those funds in expectation for going over and then not fill positions and do other things.
Right.
So we are going to spend all of the other money, and we're gonna have to go for carryover, third quarter, or some other allotment.
And if we didn't receive that funding, we would be in the situation that we've been for years where we're taking money
From somewhere
other
else.
operations to fund forestry.
Question.
Okay.
And there's a question from Abby.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering, in terms of thinking through these reductions, are they weighted? Because I'm reading here about the ability to address, a situation that could be threatening life and property. Is that weighted differently from some of the other reductions?
When you say weighted, do you mean are they prioritized? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, yes.
Well, I mean, you said, life saving, so obviously, not in that way, but the 1.2, we weighted a lot of it based on the fact that we've been operating under a certain, paradigm. And so we received 890, and so to go 200 less than what we received this time is doable. And hopefully we've sort of proved the case, and this is why this needs to be fully funded. And when the county gets back up, then we can get those $200,000 back. And so thing about forestry, is.
I don't think the question is about forestry specifically. I think she's just asking the cuts you're presenting, are they in an order in which
Oh, no.
we would like the board of supervisors to take
They're not prioritized.
this one
No,
first?
we're not these are not prioritized.
When
Is that
we-
what you're asking?
When we have the discussion, whatever that Wednesday is, September 11th.
11th.
Are they gonna be ranked at that
No.
point? Right, so it's just gonna be, if I understand the directive.
I mean, we could change our mind about
Well,
that. if
that's
we
what I'm
wanted
asking,
to.
is if I understand the directive from across the street, they would look at it, see which are quote unquote doable or whatever the language was. Would we not want to have some,
We would have conversations across the street after that, and we'd be talking sort of about things like how this conversation went, what kind of things we heard from the public, all of those types of things to determine, and then they propose something, and then we come back and, say, no, don't take an extra 200,000, and why does that not work, and those kind of things.
so there would be that conversation on, over the course of several months of trying to, in effect, prioritize if they said, we're not gonna do 10, we're gonna do 5. And then would that come back to us, or does that just,
No, I think
No.
once it submits, it's kind of a little bit out of our hands. So if we
General fund.
wanted to, because it's the general fund, they can do what they want. If we wanted to, as a board, we could decide to prioritize them if we wanted. I don't know that that's a useful exercise.
I
but-
think it might be useful to see what all of them are first, and then see if that's even something that you guys want to,
it just seems like it'll be a dynamic conversation that frankly, Kyle, I think you'd have to trust.
Sure.
You getting
Yes.
pulled into with Jay.
Yep.
And just go forth, have the battle and do it.
Abby, did that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, the next item is related to athletic field mowing. Right now, our standard is to mow athletic fields 2 times a week. This would reduce the mowing cycle to 1 time per week. Clearly, that would impact the playability of the field, safety of the fields, and satisfaction from community members that are using the fields.
Is that a contractor or is that staff?
Contract.
That's what I thought.
that was one of the reductions, just highlight the one that was in the 7% extra from last year. Yes.
The next item on the list is just reducing overall mowing. So depending on the park, the amenities within the park, the type of area within the park, we have different standards for when those areas are mowed. And so we're reducing in a variety of different ways, those standards. So parks that were mowed, 1 time a week, now would move to 2 times a week. Parks that are mowed once a month would be mowed every other month. And I'm just throwing those out as examples, but basically it would reduce our mowing cycle significantly. This is an area next to trees that we probably get the most complaints about. And so we would definitely hear from the community when they see the grass, high around a rec center or any other facility.
And these aren't fields, these are aesthetic. Yeah.
The next item is related to porta potties. Our recommendation here is that we reduce the cleaning cycle of the porta potties. Right now, we're cleaning the porta potties 3 times a week, and we started doing that during COVID. We would reduce the cleanings to 2 times a week.
And this is gonna sound super like boastful, because it's only $48,000 we're talking about it, but if I had a prior, like, I'd put that, because it's pre-COVID, it's post-COVID, these are the pre-COVID times, 2 times a week is.
As long as you can get them all done on Fridays, you're fine.
Yeah. Right, because that's the other thing, is that it's really the ones
Timing
before the
thing, it
weekends
really
that
is.
really matters, the
Yeah.
ones going on Tuesday and Thursday,
Yeah.
2 people, yes.
The next item on the list is related to athletic courts. This is funding related to the renovations of our tennis, basketball, pickleball, futsal courts. We received additional funding last year. We're recommending that we reduce this by $250,000. To put it in perspective, we have 412 courts. With the remaining budget, we would probably be able to do 2 courts a year. Right now, with the funding that we have, we're able to do about 5. As you know, we've been able to do more than that because of the money that we receive from the county through the general fund sinking fund. There is more of a focus on courts than there's ever been. And so there is a lot of expectations in the communities for us to increase the maintenance standards on the courts. So we will definitely hear about this from the community.
Just given my history in this space, saying that we have a life expectancy of 10 years in these courts, that isn't close to what we're getting out of these courts. I think that, again, as the person who was asked to go testify a bazillion years ago, that'd be us doing 41, an average of 41 courts every year. So on a 10-year cycle, that doesn't happen. There are courts, you and I sat at Lake Accotink that one time, and it would have been 25 years.
Yeah.
So I just,
So the standard is and the life cycle is, but the reality is we've never had enough money to replace them based on what the industry standard is for court
I
renovation.
mean, it does have the caveat with regular maintenance.
I mean, but with regular maintenance, they're supposed to last 10 years. I'm just saying that it implies they're lasting a lot longer than that. Some of them,
They are lasting.
I think that's important to remember as we're thinking about the impact of the cut.
I think some are lasting longer and some are actually
Yeah,
lasting
some
a
are-
lot less,
yeah.
right? Where we're having to go in a couple of years later, depending on the type of.
And the
renovations that we
floodplains
have.
and those kind of
Yeah.
places, yeah.
Yep.
And the use.
Well, the floodplains, I think, are the particular problems, or at least were in the past. Because back in the day, we were allowed to put them in.
This is still me. So then the next item is related to trail maintenance. As you know, based on our 2016 needs assessment, trails are the most popular amenity within our system. For years, we have struggled with maintenance of our trails based on our funding. Over the last couple of years, we've increased trail funding and to the point where we now have a $500,000 budget. Our recommendation here would be to decrease it by 250. Again, this would impact our ability to maintain the most popular amenity that we have within the system.
So both this one and the last one are reducing more than the additional money that we
Yeah.
theoretically just received.
Mhm.
Okay. Super.
So the next item is related to general park maintenance. Oh, sorry.
I don't have my glasses on.
Can I go ahead? Oh, thank you. I think I heard you say this, Jay. How do we ensure, because based on what Kyle was saying, so I see that we got some additional funding, and then now for a number of them are proposed or not yeah, proposed cut, not recommended, but proposed, is more than what we receive. So how do we ensure that when things tick back up, we can make a case? And I thought I heard you, but I wasn't entirely clear. But we can make the case that we actually do need the money.
Well, I mean, I'm hoping that we made the case last year that we need the money, which is why we got funded, as much as we did get funded, to really help with these, issues. I look at the cuts as not I mean, it's an exercise that everybody has to, get done. I don't think it's right now a reflection of us not needing the money. We know, and I think that, Mike talked about it. The whole county had a 7, right now, I'm gonna get to your point. The whole county had a 7% cut last year, and the assumption was that there's a little bit of fluff some places they could rein in and whatever it is. This exercise is not, they're expecting this is an actual exercise of stuff. So I think that, the assumption is that everybody is likely, maybe not everybody, but the vast majority of things put forth are gonna need to be re-argued or relitigated at some point later on. And we were successful the first time. I have faith that we'll be successful, this time. All the things that we're doing here are really some of the highest wanted and desired things by the public, so.
But before we move on to this one, Abena, my answer to your question would be that making the case is incumbent upon all of us. On this board, we all report to a board of supervisors member. So if you're not in their ear, you're not doing the job on behalf of the board that should be doing. So I mean, it's really up to all of us to be making that case. That's where it's got to come from.
That's your question, Abena?
Yes, thank you.
And what do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just was thinking, in this area, fallback for some of these might be the Mastonbrook program. Because not repairing but replacing would fall under that program. So if we could find organizations that could help us out with partnering, then some of these things might actually get done.
Still happen.
So the next item on the list is general park and facility maintenance. Our non-recommended cut is 350,000. This would impact our ability to maintain everything from dugouts, picnic shelters, benches, dog parks, roads, parking lots, and stabilization of new acquisitions. Next, turn it back over to Jay.
Thank you very much. So this next item is to increase the foundation funding that they provide to us by $300,000. So this would be asking the foundation to raise an additional $300,000 to cover the expenses associated with operating the foundation, which includes the staffing and the operating costs that are general funded. This will require the foundation to raise additional funds, unrestricted funds, and one of the options could be to add a additional admin fee to all of the donations that we receive to get to that 300,000 to pay for staff. Those funds then will be reinvested back into the park authority. The impacts include reduction in donation amounts for the program, since 20% would have to be going to this. 10 to 20% we did. That's based on a $1.5 million. They would have to require a 20% admin fee. Example, summer entertainment series, current fundraising goals, $158,000 would now require a fundraising goal of $190,000.
Next slide. Okay, this is Amy Vosper, the other deputy director with the Park Authority. This reduction would be to either WPFO or eliminate any ecologist one position in the natural resource division. That equates to $65,000. I'm as one of the county's most important programs, and certainly one of the most important programs for the Park Authority. The current program includes 62 parks with 6,000 volunteers contributing nearly 20,000 hours of service. This would curtail the ability to engage additional volunteers to expand the IMA program, and it would reduce the scale and effectiveness of countywide invasive management.
Is this currently a vacant position or is this,
It's vacant.
okay?
We didn't want to add that to the slide. Yes.
But
You can go.
but this is the one that we just got authorization from the
right?
Board of Supervisors
No,
last year. to
No,
hire.
this is an older position.
Oh,
Yes. This position supports the invasive removal and as well as some restoration efforts.
How many total people do we have? In this, how many of these positions are there?
IMA or
Ecologist
ecologist?
Whatever
Just
this
one.
represents.
How many positions
Oh.
this represents? One position.
No.
How many
How
people,
How
how
many
many
people on
positions,
staff doing this?
how many positions currently in IMA?
In IMA, there'd be 4. 4,
So we'd be cutting 25%.
yes.
Well, is it 4 including this one or 4 plus this one is 5? Okay,
This is part of what came forward with what former Supervisor Faust had advocated.
A couple years ago.
what? Well, I know it says WPFO / eliminate, so the eliminate, I understand. If we WPFO it, that means what?
So we're looking into possibilities such as the stormwater funding and having conversations with DPWS. We're also looking into other avenues of what we could actually WPFO for some of
So
natural
we'd be
resources
looking
too.
for other funding sources
Sources.
throughout the county to charge this position to. Okay.
But
This is the-
understand the rest of the county is also trying to do a 10% cut. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, so the WPFO, so it's only for general fund now, so the
Right.
funds that aren't general fund are not doing like a 10% cut, so
Right.
example, DPWES
Okay.
has like
Very little. that's general.
$15,000, because they have very little general fund
I
dollars.
see, okay.
And so that doesn't impact, it's not pushing it down
Thank
for
you.
somebody else
Thank you
to
for
be cutting.
explaining that.
We put WPFO / eliminate, we are of course gonna go do everything that we can to try to get a WPFO or another option, but we need to put both on there, because the crux of it is $65,000 would be leaving the general fund, and we'd have to figure out how to fill the gap.
Got it. Thank you.
Can you have a question on your screen?
Donna.
Jonah.
You have a question?
I do. So, as I understand it, this is not one of the positions that was added in the last, budget round. So is this, vacant because someone's left recently, or has it been vacant for a while?
As far as I know, it's been vacant for a bit of time.
Do we know why it's been vacant?
We had not, you can come up.
You wanna come up?
It's been vacant for about a year.
Did you hear that?
It's been
No, unfortunately, I can't hear that.
vacant for about a year now.
Okay,
Departure from the agency.
Yeah.
what's that?
A departure from the agency, somebody left.
Oh, I see, okay. So, I mean, is it that the position is not needed, that there's not enough work to fill it, or that just there haven't been good candidates, or what's kind of the?
So we've had quite a few initiatives to get the Bamboo and IMA program up and running and fulfilled moving forward. So this has not been one of the highest priorities on the list, which means that it stayed vacant for a little bit longer than usual.
And I'm a manager switched.
Yes.
So oftentimes when we have a manager that leaves, we fill that position and then fill the people under, instead of filling the people under, then you let them have to choose their.
That makes sense, yeah, got it. So the supervisor, that position has recently been changed? The person in that position has been recently changed?
Yes, and we actually have a person who used to work with the Park Authority in the Natural Resource Program is now back with us and is now the leader for the Bamboo / IMA program.
I see.
Patricia Greenberg is back.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay, thank you.
Questions? Okay.
Okay, the next on the list is to eliminate a historic resource specialist 2 in the Heritage Resource Division, equaling about $83,000. This position is vacant. It is in the in this Heritage Resource Branch, which monitors about 130 historic sites. It would limit the future growth of the property assessments needed for documentation as well to move the resident curator program forward. This position has been vacant for some time. We just have not had the funding available to fill this position to move this program forward into the future. And so that's why it is remained vacant.
Just because somebody left also.
No, it is, it's just been vacant.
The same question as last. Yeah. I mean, same question. How many people did this job?
3.5. So it's,
So does that
David,
3.5 include this position?
no, it would be 4.5. Yeah.
But this position's been, sounds like this position was never filled.
It hasn't been filled in a very long time.
Because we haven't had the
And
funding.
had the funding to do it.
So we have held a lot of positions vacant historically because we don't have the personnel funding to pay for it.
Yeah, I remember that.
This was one of those.
So on the personnel issue, because I remember there was some meeting, Bill, I don't remember when, you guys, we came in here again one summer and we went through a process to do this. And there was on the vacant positions thing. As we go through this, whether it's through this process, when we're saying, tell us if it's vacant or not and how long, can you also let us know at the end how many positions that have been vacant for, I don't know, more than 6 months, or whatever, we aren't eliminating?
So we went through the exercise, when did we do the vacancy exercise? With the DMV?
June.
June, July.
June, July. So the first step, I just want to. The county is doing this. The first step to all of this was DMV went through a whole vacancy exercise and did that exact thing. It looked at all vacancies that had been vacant for a year. How long do we know roughly? Yeah, and we had to go in and justify all of those ones as to sort of what we just explained about the trickle down effect, some of the ones that we don't have the funding for, in which case they can take the positions, but there's no funding, so we had to make it clear, like all the maintenance positions that we were talking about earlier, we want to make it clear that it's a numbers exercise, but you're not exercising those dollars from our budget because there's no funding associated with those positions. So we went through all of that, and that's one of the first things that we did here to look at all of the vacancies that we have, which is how these come.
Maybe I misunderstood. I thought that you said that the funding hadn't historically been available for this. So if the funding, if there hasn't been funding for this, then why does it count as part of the cut?
Right.
If
I don't
what
know
you
where the
just said,
funding
it wouldn't
came
count,
from.
I don't understand.
And that's where I'm at too. And another way to say it, are we saving anything if it's already not filled?
And why are they
not-
counting it?
And we're not spending the money on it.
So we typically hold vacant a certain number of positions a year. As we've discussed in the past, we have more personnel funding and.
We understand. that.
Right, right. So really, it's just a swap. There will have to be another position that's frozen if we don't have enough operating dollars to cover those costs. So it would be an exercise of looking through and making sure that we have all the funding. It's more of an art than a science because it really depends on how much our operating costs are going up a year, how many vacancies we need to hold.
Okay, but, and again, and I remember being told government budgets are not regular budgets and all the rest of it last time, and not totally understanding it then. So I apologize up front. But if what I understood you to say, which was this position had not been funded for a while, which means we've been spending no money on it. And if the county was trying to identify those positions and not wanting to count them as being cuts, aren't we including something on the list which hasn't been funded and therefore wouldn't count as a cut?
So I think that whether we're talking about with habit, it's not that this position, so. We are not, and I want to be careful because I'm not saying that we're not funded. We have to, the assumption if we're fully staffed, every single position we have is full. would be X amount. We don't get that much. Because the assumption is there's going to be turnover. People are gonna leave. There's gonna be 4 months in between. There's a required lapse that we're required to hold for positions. So if you look at how much money we have and how many positions and how much they all cost, those two don't match. Because no department ever spends exactly the amount of money that they have.
So
I think
that's where
that-
this money's really coming from,
Correct.
that wiggle room amount.
Right.
Just that accounts for all the
Correct.
turnover that happens in a year.
Sure, yes. And if,
Turnover, yes.
and so Sarah, Mike, and, you know, HR are always sort of readjusting throughout the year and looking at things at the beginning in July, it's hire everybody. And then maybe in September, October, November, when it's nobody's left, it's like, hold on.
Yeah.
We're about to, like, last year, we slid into home base barely, like, with $40 almost in our personnel numbers. And other times we have this big, you know, gap because we had a lot of retirees or we had a lot of, you know, turnover. And sometimes when people, you know, things like a position, and I'm getting, a position will stay vacant, we'll have a vacancy for a very long time that changes positions because our staff are great, and so they end up getting promoted. And
Right.
so this promoted still leaves that same vacancy, and then somebody else promotes into that, but still leaves that same vacancy. And so that goes, you know, a long year. So it's not so much that each position has its own, that this did not have its own funding. It was that what I was talking about with Sarah about the art of trying to flip it around. It's more of a, you can't hire that position.
It wasn't the highest priority to hire.
Right.
So it was held vacant.
I
Wasn't.
I accept all that,
Mhm.
but I don't understand. So cutting it makes all the sense in the world because it has no impact on anybody because we haven't been doing the job. The work has not been done. There's been nobody in the spot to do the work. Cool. Okay, that makes sense. I don't understand how it saves. In the end, if it hasn't been a priority to fill, unless you're saying, oh, by the way, there's going to be a different vacancy, which would seem to me to be then the impact is not eliminate this person. It's the other vacancy in somewhere else, field maintenance,
Mhm.
that you're gonna hold vacant so that that work doesn't get done.
Mhm.
So either the impact is really that that work doesn't get done, or there's no real impact. I just,
Think of it in two pots. Think of it as where the position is coming from is here. This is historic heritage resources where the position is coming from. The money is the same pot. So it's the same pot of money if I take $82,000 from here or take somebody out of maintenance or what we're saying is we can't take the position out of maintenance. We can take the position out of here, but we need to be $82,000 short in personnel.
The way this.
So you have to separate the two things out because it's not the same sort of, it's not the same sort of pot, I mean, it's the same pot of money, but it's a different, does that make sense?
no.
It really will depend on what is our turnover rate, how many positions we need to hold vacant. So for the past couple of years, our vacancy and turnover rate has been significant. So we haven't been saying you have to hold 30 positions, which when we were fully staffed and not seeing the turnover, we were holding 30 plus positions to be able to make budget. So now we work with the divisions, look, as Jay said, on a monthly basis, how are we doing? How are projections looking for the remainder of the year and determining how many positions at that time we need to hold vacant to be.
Mike, we don't have to have the money to put on the table. By cutting this position, we just get less money next year, so that's where the difference is.
The reality actually is that these positions that we've talked about so far, next year would likely not be filled, even if we were fully funded, because they're the ones, they're the lower priority ones that we hold open and stuff like that. But we will be saying now that these are the positions we're gonna cut, which means for this absentee float for positions, it's actually going other places other
The
than
money's
this,
gonna go elsewhere.
like field maintenance, like
Mhm.
other things.
Mhm.
And we're gonna refill those positions slower, just these are not gonna be filled at all. So this is almost kind of a waste of time exercise. It's not a waste of time. We understand what we're not gonna be trying to hire, but.
It doesn't tell us what we're not gonna, yeah,
That's right. It doesn't tell us what we're not.
what we're not gonna do.
Well, probably because we don't know that yet.
That's right.
No, I said, but in
And-
terms
and
of,
staff will continue to prioritize
if
that.
we're gonna go
Yeah.
across the street and if somebody's gonna have a conversation across the street and say, this is the impact of the cut. The impact of the cut is not the elimination of a person who hasn't.
Well, it is and it
It
isn't,
is.
because at some point this would never That's the end of this
We
one.
had spaces that, we had vacancies that were years old.
I understand this,
when we did this way back when.
but at some point, this is still an impact, because this work will never happen unless we went back and added and begged them to give us this position again. So an impact of this cut is that this position will not exist until we,
One thing to note so far, every single one of these positions, we should have filled. They are important things.
sure,
They may not be as important as some.
As others,
but they're
right.
Not things that we want to blow off.
right.
We
Right.
should have them filled.
That's right.
At the risk of extending this further, but just to be clear. The previous slide, the 65,000 is the same thing. That's not attached to that position
Right.
either. Okay,
Correct, right. It's the same thing. Understand?
It's been a balancing act the entire time.
Yes.
We're doing what we can to maintain the balance, because if you remember correct, from past years, we lost positions in 1996, and we were not able to get any of those positions back until the last couple of years, where we started to get some of those positions back. So these vacancies or dollars have been used to kind of offset that from giving up those positions,
Position, right.
because we knew we would never give them back. Now we're cutting to bone, where
Yeah.
we actually may have to do that. That's the bottom line.
The bottom line, all that really matters here is one job, two job, three
Exactly.
job.
Yes, sir.
And staff will prioritize.
Exactly.
Which one job, two job, three job.
Yep.
Doesn't
Yes.
get filled.
Yeah.
So when we finish our total count of what jobs we're cutting,
Yes.
that's what matters, is the number we're gonna be
Exactly.
operating with. This
Hopefully
last
it's all
staff
on
will
attrition
be
and it's not
forward.
Yeah, exactly.
actual people saying it's.
well, I think that's why
Like-
those two are
Get into
vacant
that.
right now.
Yeah, and like Sarah said, this is an art, not a science.
And there are
And it has
agencies that are giving money back. So the reason why we're not, is there are agents where we're sliding into home base, there are ones that are contributing to carryover because they have positions and they're not filling them and they're not needing them.
Right,
And they don't need the money to move someplace else because they're overfunded, and so it goes back into the coffers.
right.
We're not that
We're not like
agency
that.
who are doing that,
But
right?
presenting- But presenting it like this may not be in our best interest. Because if we say they're vacant and we go into that they're vacant, then they're just gonna, oh, well, you didn't need it anyway. It's really important that people understand that it's actually
Yes,
higher priority positions, although I think these are high priority positions.
are all high priority
They're all high
positions,
priority.
yes.
But higher priority positions will suffer in this exercise.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because we'll have to keep them open for longer. Yeah,
Did you want to continue?
no,
Just checking. Okay, no, okay. So, here's one of the big ones. Again, I refer you back to that pie chart. And so, closing one nature center and one historic site. We're not proposing a nature center or a historic site at this moment in time. We're taking, the way that we did this here is taking the average, to figure out how much, this would yield at $644,000. This would be a significant reduction in force. These are people in seats,
Yeah,
not vacancies that we're talking about. This would impact engagements with over 100,000 visitors annually, mostly children, eliminates field trips, thousands of public, private, and homeschool students. And it really does impact our ability to deliver, on our mission. This one is, unlike everything else that we're talking about, if in fact the county comes back and says this is something that they want to consider, we would come back to the board, because that's why you all get paid the big bucks, is to decide on which ones we're going to, or help us decide on which ones that we would propose out there. But this is how, what do you say? Oh, thank
yeah,
you.
right, there you go.
I'm gonna.
That's important to note for the advocates and for all of the people who really put their blood, sweat, and tears into all of our sites, and they're so important to us. And I don't even want to go there unless we have to go there. In terms of that, it is a significant reduction in force that we're talking about. So that's
So one thing I'll just say that is worth considering, and I don't know where you would, where the park authority would end up on this. I don't know if county policy would end up on this, but there was a previous director who proposed impacting the nature centers. And at the time, there were business folks who expressed a willingness to be sponsors of said nature centers. And that would, you know, and clearly they wanted signage and some other kinds of things. And a lot of the public at least seemed to indicate that was fine as long as the nature center stayed open. And the director was like, absolutely not, that will commercialize the parks and we're never gonna let that happen. I say that out loud because when we did this, you know, I mean, it was a 2-year out forecast, as I recall. It was kind of one of those, in the future, this will could happen thing. But there were business folks that at the time had stepped up and were willing to say, oh, I'll put, you know, $100,000 towards this if I can have a sign up and whatever else. I say that because we poo-pooed it and didn't want to do it last time. But I think things like that could be explored before we physically close them. And I don't know what the business community's interest would be at this time anyway, but.
I don't think we just poo-pooed it. That was an extended conversation.
No, the director was like,
Director.
absolutely not. We were like, whoa, wait. But the director stood up at a public meeting.
I remember that.
For this exercise that we're doing right now, that's not a productive discussion.
No, it is.
We're trying to maintain.
Right.
I apologize.
Okay, next slide. Yeah, close Scott's Run Nature Preserve parking lot. This would be a reduction in force of 3. They are temporary,
Limited term.
exempt employees. We're talking about closing the parking lot, gating and locking the parking lot, and access will be limited to residents that can walk to the park. The savings here comes from eliminating the police and the security presence that's needed in the park, as well as the staffing. It reduced frequency of FC personnel on site, which could impact the ecological resources. And, you know, there's an equity component to one of our most beloved resources being only accessed through pedestrian in a fairly affluent area. But it's $152,500.
Not sure you'd have to worry about the affluent access. I think that people will find their way into that park.
Well, I was not gonna, cause that's outside of I was not gonna say, yes, that's the other,
And there is a safety component.
aspect.
There is a safety component, yeah. That's where the elimination of police and security coming.
Sorry. I was back on Scott's Run. Okay, sorry. So this reduction is to remove a part-time photographer. It's a photographic specialist for $27,000. It's a reduction in force, a non-merit. We have several specialists that take pictures part-time. And this would be a reduction. I just noticed on here that we need to talk more about the impacts a little bit more than we have here. It would impact our staff. We do have a full-time photographer though, who's now getting up to speed. Will be hired soon. Don Sweeney has retired, but I see that we need to do a little bit more on the impacts. This would be a reduction of a person. I mean, a non-merit person, but it is a person in the seat. We have 2 specialists, part-time specialists with 1 full-time photographer. So it's going to be a tough one because we have, you know, but we do events all during the week and on weekends, and we can't have the same person working 24/7. So this will limit our flexibility.
The comment about including this one is that it's justified. But people say, similar to Mike's lab comment, that you could get a volunteer to do this or something like
Yeah.
that. So including this in.
That's a risk. That is a risk. That is a risk, but we also can't put everything in that, is such a high risk and we can't cut it at all. We have to kind of have a couple sacrifices.
So, John?
Thanks. I just had a question about the slide. I was thinking actually that it might be kind of interesting to know how the photography would change. In other words, like if we, if when we're putting this forward, if it ends up being put forward, talking about which events wouldn't be covered, and what districts that impacts. I think that could be interesting in terms of impacts.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yes. It's me. So, as we talked about a little bit earlier, in the development division, we WPFO salaries to bond, and to other, funding sources where possible. We now, at this point in time, WPFO about $1 million. This would increase it to $1.7 million. It would have definitely an impact on our projects. This would decrease the amount of bond funding available for design and construction. And just as an example, for the 2026 bond, it would be approximately 10.6 million of the $180 million bond. This would decrease our ability to do probably one less park or so, or two, as we move forward with our next bond.
We already do 6 million,
Yeah.
so this is an additional 10. We're at 6 and it would take us to 10.6.
Right now in a bond project, at least as I understood it, we were charging back the time necessary to do the stuff for that bond project.
Not 100%. There's a percentage that the park develop, depending on what so our large capital projects like Mount Vernon, that the WPFO for that is in cap facilities. And like I had mentioned before about that they don't have a lot of general fund, their WPFO percentage is very high. It's almost 100% of what they're doing. So our projects cost that much more because we have to pay the staff that are doing that. We are not, everybody in Park Development Division does not charge 100%
No.
to projects. So this is increasing the amount that they charge to projects.
But it's 100% of their work just on projects that are bond funded?
The majority of their projects, but you have to be really careful because it ends up being the strategy of, this is a balance, the strategy of WPFO, when I was in Montgomery County, the equivalent to switching stuff over from general fund to revenue fund was adding chargebacks. That's what they're called. And so you get to a point where a $100,000 project costs $450,000, which is really hard to explain to a supervisor who's like, could you put in this $100,000 fence? I'm like, sure, it'll cost you $500,000 because of so you got to balance those two things in order. So we don't have the maximum because we didn't have enough bond money to do the projects that we're doing. So we're balancing those two.
So we weren't charging back 100% of the person's work on that project.
Correct.
You're only doing 8% on that specific capital project.
Correct.
Yeah, I thought we were, and I thought we were somehow now going to charge back more than that. I'm like,
No.
whoa, wait.
No. People get a specific amount that you charge 30%, whatever that they WPFO.
Because we already do get those comments now about if I go through parks, it costs me X.
Mhm.
If I don't go through the parks, it costs me something less than X.
Correct.
So.
I mean, best case scenario, like Heaven's opened all of our park, we wouldn't charge anything to bond, and then we have all of 180, and we just gained $10 million to do other stuff, but it's the nature of the beast. And that's it. So let me just give you in no particular order. This is kind of where we are. So park ops total is about $1.5 million. Park resource management's total is $796,000. They're very personnel heavy. Majority are encumbered in the resource management. Park Services is $109,000, operations only. Planning and Stewardship is $147,000, Development is $593,000, Admin $421,000, and then Marcom 26,000. And I think that we are giving or we're proposing an extra $1 or so
Your director's
in
office.
pennies in Director's Office. Oh, it's not in here, but yes, I think they had that in the admin. Yeah.
And admin.
A couple questions.
Mhm.
First is, there is no general fund money going into new things. Building things that are planned for the future. This is not replacement or maintenance. This is new structures. We don't have any general fund that's.
Into
going
new
to go
structures?
Structure.
No, that's usually bond, CIP. I'm sorry, I don't. understand
Pickleball
what-
courts.
So the maintenance aspect of that would go, if we're gonna restripe, if a tennis court is rated D and we're gonna re-asphalt it, then we would talk about restriping it for pickleball, and that would be coming out of that. There are other funds that comes out of, as well. But if we're sort of greenfield development on grass, building a new pickleball court, because of the cost, that would likely be bond.
Okay, and the other thing was, on one of
Or
those
other-
earlier slides where we talked to, you had that section that was not touchable. You had fleet maintenance and vehicle replacement. I'm questioning the vehicle replacement. Why is that off the table?
We can't touch any of that. They're all percentages. We cannot negotiate it. It's not something that we go in and we say we used X amount of gas money and you should give us a break or legal things. It is a set in stone fee that we send over. It's not even a conversation. This is, they don't bill us or, whatever it is, it's a non-negotiable.
Based on the number of vehicles that we have
Correct.
within our fleet.
Mhm.
And every year we go through a process of working with them to see, can we eliminate any of the vehicles within the fleet or replace them with something else?
And that is the question.
Mhm.
And we eliminate these vehicles.
We go down to as bare bones as we possibly can. It's tough when you have 60-man sites to be able to get down. I mean, we are in no way in an embarrassment of riches when it comes to vehicles. We talked about that in the maintenance memo. We've got, vehicles that somebody comes in and tries to pull a string to get started, all the time. So, yeah, our biggest issue is the low mileage, I think. And part of that is just because of the distance in some of these yards or places are from where they're going.
But
But
still, I have the question of, if we decide not to replace vehicles.
we can't
that's the
decide.
cost.
I don't think that we can decide not to replace. The vehicle replacement is usually based on and Kim, when I start lying, please jump up. It's usually based on a calculation of how many times it's been in the shop, how old it is, how many miles it is, and they tell you you're replacing the vehicle. You don't ask for another vehicle or say we don't want that other vehicle. That's how the vehicle replacements work. We have to pay for it. We do have to pay for it, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
all those are charges that the county gives to us.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that Ron is talking about.
And just, we could start off with that. I think that the second sentence after we were given the 10% is the internal costs are not on the table. That's not one of the, I'm sure they're doing this exercise. They're not doing the extra. They're gonna be looking at gas prices and everything else themselves.
In other words, they make that decision of what that's
Yes.
gonna be.
Yes,
They
yes.
are-
We just
Nobody
accept
was,
it, move on.
nobody's
Right.
held sacrosanct in this whole exercise. So yes.
So one of my initial thoughts, which I think you answered, was we're using, back on the personnel thing,
Mm.
we're using close to all of our personnel money.
Every dime. Yes.
So eliminating, if there are positions that have been vacant for a year
Mm.
that aren't on this list,
Mm.
eliminating them, the impact is actually on something that is being done. In other words, if we eliminate that position, somebody else somewhere is either going to leave and stay vacant for a year or 2 or
Yes.
3,
Correct.
or, but it's gonna have an impact on that stuff.
Correct. And let me just put a finer point. Come December, or I just want to I'll just pick, she's right across. Laura has a vacancy. In January, she cannot just go and advertise it. She has to call and talk to Mike and say, do we have the money for this? Oh, you can do it an X date. There is no, it's not an assumed, thing. Obviously, if you have a turnover and we need to fill it, then we'll just do it, right away. But it's a hopscotch type of thing, especially later in the year, fiscal year.
I think coming up with a way. I think I'll try to that I can use, but coming up with a way to explain that to folks. So, because when asked, you have 17 vacancies, why are you closing a nature center when you have 17 vacancies? Trying to explain that to somebody, I think if some of these things become real, it's gonna be really important for them to understand that we're not just sitting there saying, oh, these positions that might have been vacant for an X amount of time. It's so important for us to, eventually feel that we're not eliminating it. Being able to explain that with some of these potential things, I think is really important.
We've been trying, we talked to DMB, and that's, when we talk to advocates and other people, we're like, you have this position, hire it. And explaining that the position exists, but the money does not exist to fund it, and the money has to come from some place else, is a very, very, very difficult thing to explain. A lot of it has to do, and we're not throwing anybody in the butt, but a lot of it has to do with not getting, MRA increases, the full, not getting, different stuff, not getting OBI increases, the cost, always use frying pan, the cost of pig
You
feed.
use two sets of
Sorry,
initials. I don't.
Sorry,
know.
not getting, market rate adjustments.
Okay.
And that's mostly revenue fund, and operating budget, not operating budget impacts, and, CPI, consumer pricing index. So
CPI.
we open up, I'm just being provided,
No.
we double the size of Frying Pan Farm Park, right? We don't get the staff that we need to staff it, but we need to staff it. So we have to figure out how we're gonna be staffing it. There's money that goes there. The cost of pig feed goes up from 1980 to now, and we haven't gotten that inflation, so we have to absorb that somehow. It's squeezing the balloon, and it's kind of going back to that maintenance presentation that we're giving. We're squeezing the balloon and trying to make it work. And it's really hard when you go back to 1980, and that one position we hired, we were fully funded for that position. We got $80,000 for that position. Why is now you don't have the money for that? Well, because we had to push that money to other things to be able to cover, because we can't not pay the bills, we cannot pay we cannot do the forestry. So it's this all-encompassing budget exercise that really, it's a shell game when you're doing something here and then you're pushing it to here. It's very hard to explain that when you're not one of those ones that give back $6, $7, $8 million at the end of our carryover. We're a receiver of that more than we are.
Did you have another question?
The only other thing that I'll add to that is DMB is always looking at our vacancies. and
Always.
Taking positions. So that exercise is ongoing. Where they're looking at, have you had positions that have been vacant for over, 2 years? And asking us, do you really need that position? And us justifying why we need to continue. So.
And you said you had just done one of those exercises in June, July. Can you
Yes.
share with the board whatever the details of that are?
Two general fund positions were taken, as well as several non-merit positions.
How out of how many?
How many, general?
I mean, you can come back. I don't need an answer now, but I'm just trying to,
How many vacant positions do we have?
yeah, like what were they looking at kind of thing?
Come back on that. The number of vacancies is, again, that's what we always focus on. What we've done a really good job on, say that we do have X number that are always vacant to say for, but then we kind of move it around a little bit in terms of, well, next time we need a maintenance worker, let's use the 4-year vacant one instead of the 30-day vacant one.
Right,
or
right,
what have you,
sure.
kind of do it that way.
And we'd have to, if we brought back, just know there's gonna be different categories, because there's different reasons why positions are vacant. They're not funded. We're in the midst of hiring, either through the trickle down approach where the person got promoted, and then we're still always gonna have that one vacancy, just moves as we're moving. So it takes a very long time to sort of finish that up. Or it takes an external candidate. And then we have like workforce planning, where we have to put things in workforce planning. So I have a plumber and I need a carpenter. I have to hold the plumber vacant and put that into workforce planning and wait 6 to 7 months to get them to come back and say, yes, you can convert this plumber into a carpenter. I always use that. And so that's the other thing. So that's vacant for a reason. So of course we're trying to reclass so that we can hire it didn't, and that's what we work with DMB all the time to explain, why is this vacant? Well, this has been vacant because of X, and this is the plan to fill it. But there's very few vacant funded positions that are just sitting around because we don't need it. Because trust me, somebody else is coming to move it someplace else.
Have a question?
I think Jonah's still got her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jonah, I thought I called on you.
Oh, no problem. I just had another question. I think Dr. Carter also has a question, or maybe her hand's still up. So I just to be clear, so I just want to make sure I understand this, Jay. So the variety of reasons why the positions are vacant, but from the previous conversations, it sounds like some of them are vacant because they're kind of like a cushion, right? For these other cost increases that are not captured in other ways for positions. And I'm just kind of wondering, if that's the case, then one of the big impacts of eliminating these positions is that it makes our cushion smaller. Is that true? Or do you?
Yes, absolutely. And I wouldn't even characterize that as a cushion. I'd call it like the ability to move things around, because that was the whole issue. A vast majority, not all of it, but a vast majority of the maintenance money that we got this year was to stop that bleeding that we had to by holding positions vacant, going to something else, pulling from, other pots to be able to handle the forestry contract and all this other stuff. And so I don't want to necessarily call it a cushion because it makes it seem like we're over, funded or over fluffed. I don't know. And that's not really the case. But yes, it does make it harder to play that shell game, because the less amount of staff that you have, the less amount of, vacancies that you can do, then less you can move people around, and it becomes a lot harder and harder and harder to do.
I mean, I'm just kind of wondering, this is not be relevant to the current budget, environment, but I'm just wondering if there's any way to make this so it's not a shell game, so that there is like a, sort of fund to deal with some of these things that you're talking about, kind of like whether, I mean, it doesn't, of course, it wouldn't even need to be a position. It sounds like it could be more just sort of like, a fund to manage the MRA, the CPI, the OBI, those kinds of things.
Do you know what we call that? The general fund. That's the fund. But we did, and I gotta say, we were really moving someplace. And again, I just wanted to, as much as we've been talking about, funding and, whatever, is this an exercise across the board? And they know that this is sort of coming and this is going to be hard. I mean, that was the whole exercise that we did. And then we ended up with, a couple $1 million, which is fantastic, to stop that shell game, to stop that bleeding, to really be able to say, if we have X amount in courts and X amount in this, and that's what we're going to spend in forestry. And then Kim can go off and do, what she's supposed to be doing. This definitely does take us backwards.
Okay,
Jonah,
so
those things are specifically asked for in our budget request. I mean, you haven't been around to see one come forward yet, but I would expect each of those 3 items to be their own specific line item in the request. And then it's up to the county to decide if they're going to fund that or not. Historically, they have generally not, or have funded it at significantly less than what's been requested.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Carter, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. So I'm taking a look at the increased foundation funding, that $300,000 there. It would seem that that particular line item, maybe we kind of for lack of a better term, shooting ourselves in the foot there, because they will be bringing in extra funding. Is that like the best thing or line to reduce?
I don't like any of them. I don't like
Of course not, but I'm talking about this is probably my fundraising hat that I'm having on. It seems like this particular one is helping to bring in certain funding and offset certain expenses maybe. And that's why I'm wondering about that one.
No, I hear you. I mean, I think it's tough once we're getting to 3.5. I mean, we're talking, we did an exercise of, not to scare anybody, but we had to do an exercise of looking at how much each park costs.
Right.
In terms of lights, and saying, okay, this is how much Nottoway costs. And are we going to close Mason District Park? And this is how much Mason District's electric bill and the cost and whatever. We went down, we've gone down to you know, that point. And we think that that's like a, you know, let's not try to, to get to that point. I mean, this is, this was not, this has been a tough
I
month or so.
understand.
Yeah.
Cynthia, I think the one thing that I would say on that is the net from the foundation is still the same. The foundation raises $1.5 million. I'm just picking that out of thin air. Whether this 300,000 is on their books or the general fund for ours, they've really only given us $1.2 million. So, I mean, it doesn't change what we are seeing at the end of the day. So I think it's just a matter of having the foundation account for the full freight of their costs.
Okay, that helps. I did kind of see that there, but thanks for underscoring that. And my last question, and by the way, Bobby didn't know I was going to ask that question. And by the way, I am looking also at our diversity initiative. None of these are really going to negatively impact those initiatives, right? Except for just maybe a little bit, but not substantially. Is that correct?
Our concert series is a very
Concert series, yeah.
public that is very well attended by a lot of different.
Closing a
people.
nature center is going to kill off a lot of our TV.
I would
Those areas.
I would imagine what Ron was talking about Mass Simple grants and Mike and seeing other people come in to, I'm sure that's gonna come into play with the mowing in the less affluent neighborhoods. Aren't gonna be able to come in and say, we're gonna contract out, we'll pay to be able to do the aesthetic mowing. And so you're gonna see a difference probably in maintenance standards just through that.
So, Cody, one, I don't think the Massimo grant can be done for mowing stuff.
Yeah, just.
No, I mean, no, because I was actually thinking through, wait, what could,
Mhm, mhm.
in terms of some of the partnerships.
But you got adoptive field.
I was gonna say, it's gonna be the adoptive fields are potentially gonna go up. And the interesting thing there might be, you might be able to agree to do, like, you might get some fields totally covered that way so that you can actually take. So the mowings you were expected to do on some of those fields, you might be able to do other places. I have no idea.
Ask Cynthia.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Question. Cynthia, did we answer that question?
Not exactly.
I didn't think so.
Well, I mean, we're impacting the budget of the park authority. Yes, it's going to have an impact. There's nothing in here that says equity directly, right? But you know, from maintenance to the concert series to pretty much everything in here, it's going to impact the overall patron experience. So, I mean, I think it's all folded up into that.
Okay.
But we're not
Yeah.
exacerbating on purpose, like.
Oh, I know that.
What that would be doing is if we were saying we're gonna move, which what we would have done in the past is move general fund over to revenue fund, that would have had a direct impact on equity. We're purposely not doing that, which is what made this exercise, you know, that hard. We did factor equity in to make sure that that was one of the factors of looking at parks. There's no possible equity inequality. There's no possible way of doing that. You can't hit one district. It have to be across, yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that it was considered. I assumed that it was, but I just really wanted to hear that. So thank you so much.
I wanna,
That's it for me.
I don't think it upsets anybody here, but I think it'll upset somebody out in the universe somewhere. As of a couple years ago, we weren't doing anything about bamboo.
Mhm.
Now the county has a requirement on us to do a bunch of stuff on bamboo. That costs a lot of money. How much is the bamboo thing costing? Because they were gonna increase it. Theoretically, so we could
Four,
be-
is it 4 total?
400.
400 is what we got
Plus a
received.
position.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. I mean, because I'm thinking we're not seeing everything we had on the last exercise on here. Why isn't that being repeated? Like the bamboo was, last year we did the bamboo for the 3%, for the 7%.
The reason we didn't include it on there is because it's an ordinance and we went and we went to the board and we said, this is how much, we're not in compliance with your own bamboo ordinance. This is how we would come into compliance. And they provided the funds to come into compliance. That'll be a longer conversation of, are we all going to be okay with not being in compliance, that we can't, the permitting entity can't not give us a notice of a violation. And so it kind of becomes, we're asking other people to do what we're not gonna do, same thing with trash and recycling. You'll see that in there in a second. We're doing this exercise and we're not adding stuff onto there, but we are adding because we have to abide by the county code.
I guess what I'm thinking is talking to board of supervisors about the fact, reminding them that this ordinance
Mhm.
has significantly increased our cost. And that, you know, if that ordinance were to, if they were to say, you know what, maybe we overreached right now in this economic time, and we can keep a nature center because we get rid of the ordinance. Or keep a historic site, I don't know what we probably, but.
Right, or delay implementation. I doubt they're gonna get rid of it.
No, right, but delay implementation 3 years.
Sarah, when you come back to the board with kind of that vacancy information, can you also recirculate the list of cuts we proposed last year, just so we can kind of see if
That would be great.
Twice a week, Kim. Brick and mortar bathrooms twice a week.
We factored that in when we were talking about the whole park, conversation of how much electricity for the lights are, bathroom cleaning, staffing, all that stuff. Okay.
I'll say it's surprising, but I'm really disappointed that we're going through this exercise and I can't help but think that it's not at least partially because people don't understand what we do. They don't understand, for example, that we're already.
Someone saying something?
We're already operating.
Oh,
Say,
Yeah, Linwood is.
Oh,
Can't hear it?
no.
Most important of that is we provide tremendous value for the percentage of the budget that's their one.
26%.
Because it's the truth. That we are a good value, a good job with the money. And related to that, is that we're on such a shoestring. And we're asked like all the other agencies in town, and people go to 10% cuts. It takes a lot bigger percentage of our management staff to go through this exercise than it does to have those huge agencies. In the county. So these are truths. These are reality. We need to get that message out about how good value we are and how taxing it is on us to go through these exercises. And we should be doing it. We should be asking. Getting a lot higher percentage. Of course. You're in a correction.
rounding error.
Rounding error.
Or the rounding error.
I think. Anyway, whatever we do to help our message, I know that's certainly the message I will take to my supervisor and everybody that I talk to. So we're a great positive, great value, great job.
what is the timeline that we're gonna go through our piece?
Hmm.
We're gonna send it across the street. I know that there's a ultimate when they have to release a budget.
Yep.
Right.
When do you, and I know it's gonna be more than the two of you. It'll involve lots of people, but I'm just looking at the two of you guys because you're the lead on figuring it out. When do you think we're gonna get an idea of?
What they take, if they take things.
So we will, okay, so we'll get snippets moving forward, not snippets about what they're gonna take from us, but snippets from the county executive and senior management team of what as the projections become more realized as to what it's gonna actually look like. Is it dire? Is it not dire? I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the table and they're talking about alternative funding mechanisms and all the whole thing. So, the budget committee on the September 17th, I believe they're going to be talking like meals tax and other things that they're going to be discussing. The budget comes out in February. In February, we'll know generally. Oh, thank you. The budget comes out in February. Before that, it won't just be a plop surprise. I mean, we will have conversations of coming in and do you need this and why do you need this and blah, 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 probably around January, Mike-ish. And so when we're coming back, as we know, we can report like kind of what we've heard through directors matters or, you know, whatever it is, where it goes. And then we will present on the county executives advertised budget come February.
Part of
when
the
it's
reason I'm
released.
asking is.
Well, I just want to add just a little bit from being on the board of supervisor side of this.
Yeah.
The county budget is locked down. Like the chairman's office doesn't know what's going to be presented until the county executive presents it. So we're not going to know any kind of specifics about what has been taken until whatever day in February, the county executive actually releases the
The
budget.
reason I'm asking is that there was talk of, if it's a nature center or park, that's gonna, hey, which do you wanna cut?
We
But
told,
that would mean that they'd have to know and tell us that they're taking it.
so that's when we're talking about it. Like if you're even thinking about, if that's even on the table, because right now, let's say it's 10%, obviously they want to over calculate for what they need. So in their minds, there's a number, there's a county number that they need. We don't know what that is or what they think it is. As that becomes clearer, that number will become clearer and then the conversations will start to happen. We're telling them, and this is not just, and I don't want to call it strategy as if it's trying to, you know, but there's no reason to create this huge issue if it's not an issue. So I'm sure the community center, the NCS is might be proposing to close a community center, or libraries might be proposing to close those. And no, we're not naming it because we don't know if we're there yet. And so they know that when we're submitting, we're talking to DMB and we told them what we're doing. So in the moment that even if it's not going to be taken, if it ever becomes like a real boy, we'll be coming back. If they don't say, when I go back and, you know, talk to them, then assume no news is good
I
news.
mean, ultimately, the real number, and I'm making this up, the
Yeah.
real number is 7%, and they may take 5 from us and 8 from somebody else. And they'll
Right.
do this weird balance all the way
Right.
through.
Mhm.
There had been that conversation about coming back to us.
Well, there's also time between February and July 1st when the new fiscal year comes into play. So we would have that time.
Yeah, that's what I was, because I just think if we do that, there's probably gonna need to be a public.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the public, you know, the people need to know what they're talking about. They're not just gonna be talking. Yes, absolutely. That's why we made it, that's been very well established and we made that very clear.
In the meantime, we will touching base with our supervisors in a uniform manner, and we all have an understanding of what we would talk to our supervisor about.
After this, we will. After the next one, yeah, but you're right. we
That's
will
what I'm
need to
getting
talk.
at, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think this came up in one of the June or July meetings and what do we say? October is when we're gonna start reaching out. So you'll hear from us to start scheduling those meetings with you with the boards for the October timeframe. So that's all, it's coming.
We'll have a real thing passed in September.
Correct.
That
And
they be-
yep, exactly. And that's why it's waiting until October, the September, whatever that is, the 25th meeting.
So I just want to make sure.
Yep.
we-
Right,
Yep.
I thought that's what you had said, so thank you.
Now,
And-
on the
yeah, there's
flip
more.
side of that, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
We're talking also about our development of the FY 26 budget. So we're looking at two pieces here. There are a couple of things that Jay and our senior team have put together in terms of new budget requests, as well as a little preview of what's we think is going to happen with the revenue fund in the next year. So first and foremost, in this conversation about equity, it's always paramount in the conversations we have with BMB as well as the Board of Supervisors. And we've already shown this very specific budget guidance, and Jay will talk about this a little bit later in terms of how we're moving forward, looking at the equity initiative, but this is what this is focused on, even in these times, continuing to focus on how we build this equity in our revenue model. Now, across the board, our general budget development guidance is certainly we had to develop the 10% budget reduction options. And then on the flip side here, given this forecast, all that the county executive is really entertaining right now in terms of new budget requests are if there are any new facilities, contract rate increases, and or the continuation of critical county operations. So we have a couple of things here to talk through. And before we do that, this is just sort of what it all looks like. If you remember, this is how we ended FY 2024. In terms of our total expenditures at almost $0.2 million. And what our budget is for FY 25. And when we start to look at the forecast, we keep those same numbers right now for FY 26 because we haven't been given any other guidance than that. And you can just see that if all of those reductions were taken, this is what it would look like. So we would be back down, below the FY 24 numbers, but remember that also reflects from 24 to 25, moving the RecPac program over to NCS. So that was our biggest budget change there. So with that,
So what's that number? Ish.
RecPac,
Yeah.
it was million.
$1.2 million.
Yeah. So with that, we do have a couple of budget requests, and Sarah, you have the first one.
So this is a continuation of the zero waste program. So we were funded for phase 1 in 25. So we're moving forward with implementation of 2 of our maintenance areas where we'll start recycling in all those parks that are related to those maintenance areas, be able to hire additional staff to assist with the trash removal and recycling. And also have staff that will work on the weekends. Next, so this is full implementation is about 3.9 million. We were funded for about $1 million this year. Full implementation for the rest of the sites for phase 2 and 3 is 2.8. Which would cover the rest of the areas within the Park Authority. This could be broken down into 2 different phases. So depending upon the money the county has available, if anything, to dedicate towards trash and recycling, we would work with them to identify, can we just do 1 more area? Could we do 2? Or how do we need to phase this moving forward? And just a reminder, this is in line with the county ordinance. For recycling.
Was the number the same on the 2 sides? No, okay.
That was what we started off with. We got funded, phase 1 was funded at $1 million, a little over $1
So the
million.
Implementation is the 39. We're now requesting the second side. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, that's
Right.
one-time investment, that's salary, that's benefits, that's operating. And then the other item, Jay.
Oh, yeah. So this is what I call OBI, which is operating budget impact. It's funding for new facilities when we open new facilities. These are all of the new and majorly renovated properties that require additional maintenance, utility, and operating costs. Jonah, it kind of gets to what we were talking about earlier. If we add in more amenities and we add more parks or we expand our parks, it costs more money to operate. And so the number of positions needed 8 merit, 2 non-merit, and 3 temporary. And this is an example. One of the examples of that is like the Woodland Education and Stewardship Center. We're not funded for staff to run that facility. And so but the facility is open. And so we're absorbing that and moving things around. And that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, that we really need to be funded for these additional things. I will caveat by saying I get this question a lot because we talk a lot about deferred maintenance. And, if I had my druthers and it worked out for all of reasons and we existed in a bubble, we'd spend the next 5 years fixing things that we have only and not building new. But the reality is for 2 reasons. First, for equity, where we have things, where things exist are inequitable by its nature. And so if we never say we're going to add new parks, then people who don't have access to parks and don't have amenities will forever not have access to parks and amenities. The second thing is, people want it. And so I can't imagine, we spend a very small percentage on it, but I know we can all imagine a situation where we said no to Stewardship Education Centers or renovating Ruckstall Park or Quanah Fairchild or whatever it is. So this is the reality of the situation. And we just really need to our funding needs to be keeping up with what we renovate and add. Next slide. So equity, again, it's TBD right now. We are working with the with county and DMB right now. And I believe we're gonna be coming back to explain sort of where we are. With that, if you remember, we had the consultant and we had an outreach campaign that ended in the spring. The plan right now is we're gonna be going to the HHS committee in October. Prior to that, we'll be coming to the Park Authority Board to talk about, majority of that will be the outreach, sort of what we learned by going out there. And then we're gonna be coming back to the HHS committee again in February.
January. It's right
January.
there on the slide.
Oh, it's right there on the slide. In January, I was doing really good. In January, and again, we'll come back to you and explain sort of that, and that's all gonna, end up with the strategy based on how we have the conversation with the BOS. We're not putting a specific dollar amount in there for equity, but we always want to keep a placeholder so that everybody here knows that we're always working on that in the revenue fund. So that's the total. We have the zero waste trash removal, which is compliance, which is unfunded mandate, operating budget impact for new facilities, and the equity funding is 0. I mean, not 0, TBD. Thank you.
Well, we literally can't. That was why they put the budget guidance in at the front from what the county, like, they'll just throw it out. Like, it's
They're
not.
only
they're
considering
considering a very
unfunded
narrow
mandates.
funded,
Yes,
narrow set of things.
facilities.
And a list for long term. If we know it's not gonna happen.
I think that might be worth doing when we meet with the supervisors. I
Yeah.
think there might be a case for, I think that's, I think putting something like that together, like pretend the constraints were not there. So when we do have those meetings with the board members in October, we could say, these are the things we would have liked to ask for, but for the,
Maybe like a yearly exercise of the fall. Trying to put a positive. Instead of. That's not just.
That'll be as politically explosive as we can cut when you start to, because then you can't go off, if you go off that list. People will be like, wait a minute, you've already established what your list was. We just. Once you make a list and say, here's how we would spend the extra money, anytime you get extra dollars. You're gonna have to justify not spending towards that list to folks that see their project on it, don't understand why it's not getting the money. I mean, I get the idea of.
What's
saying
the
there's
worst
a lot of
thing
stuff
that,
to do.
what's the worst that could happen? You have constituents screaming to supervisors that they want this, they want it.
Well, it depends on, I mean, we can talk strategy, but it depends on what there is, and I'm gonna not insult in any way, Kim, who's not looking at me, but look at her. But the reality is there are things that aren't as flashy that we desperately need. And so in order to get that not flashy, but we desperately need, I needed to stand alone. So I did not, we purposely last year nothing can compete with maintenance. We need them to focus on maintenance. Because if you put a shiny corner over there that we're gonna get X, Y, and Z, people are gonna go for that. And it's not, exciting to say we need a new pickup and we need people to pick up trash and whatever it is. And so trying to figure out sort of how we tailor that to solve a problem and then move on to the next problem without sort of being led by, other things.
Sensitive to that.
Yes.
And organize it in a way to make sure that point is made.
Well, we can generally talk about it.
Be a good thing you think about as you do that.
I'm guessing that will come up in discussions with supervisors anyway.
It's probably gonna be the focus of a bond discussion.
Are you done yet?
And wait, there's more.
Oh, God. I forgot about the revenue fund. Yes.
So
How did I
just
forget about
to,
that?
kind of set up some other conversations that we'll have upcoming. This is just a quick preview of just our baseline projections for the revenue fund for next year. And also really setting up some of the discussion that we'll be having about fee adjustments, which are an inevitable part of this as well. So again, just to remind everyone how we ended FY '24 with the revenue fund. We had a net revenue for all those transfers and everything that we talked about of ended up being just shy of $641,000. And remember at that time, we also asked the Park Authority Board to approve a revised budget that is based on how we ended up finishing last year. So this is the first run here. The middle column is the PAB approved budget. And we'll continue to monitor that, maybe coming back, later in the year as well, once we get a really good sense of what the operations and the results look like. But right now, if we just take all of our baseline assumptions, and I'll talk about those in just a moment, you can see that the revenue fund, we would project growth, both based on the impact of already approved fee adjustments as well as our trends in capacity and what we've been able to fill. You can see revenue of about $62.3 million and total expenditures of about $61.3 million. So just under $1 million in net revenue is what that baseline shows us. Remembering, of course, that our goal is to try to reach about $4 million in net revenue. So this is just showing you what the baseline looks like. And we've baked into that some of these revenue increases, some of these other pieces you can see here. This already shows that we have that need even before things happen with salaries or anything else as part of the budget process. We will have that need to make some adjustments and recommendations for approval here for fee changes. And we will be coming back to the board at the end of October with our proposed package of fee adjustments. And we will be asking at that point for the approval to advertise and then go through our public process for that. So remember, now we are working to make sure that any fee adjustments would be effective in January. And finally, this year, we're able to then bring those into the budget process as well. So you would see that impact in what the final version is of the revenue fund projected budget for next year. We have all kinds of opportunities for input coming up. Ben assures me that we will be able to shorten, I think, the web address for where public comment is, although these links are live. We have a budget page that we've been working on where we have all the information for FY25, all those different presentations and discussions. And then we've also built that for FY26 so people can see these presentations tonight, these discussions, and they're able to go there for our public input as well. September 11th will be the presentation on or the budget priorities as well as the public hearing. I think we have 6:30 here, but I know we're still, you said 5:45 earlier, we're still working on that. And then you'll see September 25th, that's where we'll have that final sort of vote on these packages for endorsement, and we'll make those available to the public there.
On that slide?
Yeah.
Can you put September 11th, 6th, can you put tentative or, I just don't think we should have a document floating around that might confuse the public on a topic.
Okay, yeah, we can adjust that in that slide. I'll provide that to you then. Yeah, we'll make that adjustment. And then again, we'll have a new fancy web address there, but this is where everything is now. So it's not buried in projects, plans, and budgets. Now it's its own page where we combine budgets and fees and everything really of a financial nature. And that was really the brainchild of Ben to make that make a little bit more sense for our public and easier to find as well. Now, Mr. Quincy, you could answer some questions, or you could also tell me here in the committee meeting if you still want me to talk.
Well, I am going to ask if there's any questions, comments.
And then Kyle's gonna stare daggers at you individually.
I didn't say I was
No, I'm
gonna
just-
entertain the question.
Just ask if there are any.
Okay, if there are no questions or comments, I think we all understand what the mission is. This committee meeting is adjourned.
All right, before we adjourn officially, just want to thank everyone again for coming out this evening. This is not our normally scheduled program. And this turned into a 2-hour meeting, but it is pretty critical to what we do. So appreciate it. remember, we had this is to everyone listening or might be listening in the future. No decisions were made this evening. We will not formally endorse and submit either the reduction list or the request until September 25. So there's plenty of time between now and then for public input. There's also time, board members, if you didn't like any of the potential cuts, you have time. We can talk about replacements for any of them. At the end of the day, we still need to send 3.5 million across the street. So if you take anything off the list, you gotta have something to replace it. But we do have time to have those conversations. And the only other thing I'll say is we're at the very beginning of what is a very long budget process. It didn't look great this time last year when they were looking for 7%, but between the advocacy work we did in the fall, the community did in the springtime, they ended up taking 0 cuts from us. And not only that, but and the county made something like $80-90 million of cuts last year, but none of them came from us. And on top of that, we ended up with additional funding. To Linwood, your point, we have a very good case to make on behalf of ourselves. And I think if we just do it again, I think we could be in a similar position, come May of next year in that regard.
Absolutely. Thanks, staff, for all the hard work. on this.
Absolutely.
And an excellent job that was done last year. That was part of our success, I'm sure. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, now I'm done. And we are adjourned. See you guys in 2 weeks.
Your Labor Day.
That's right.
Your holiday.